Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. 3 days, 11 votes, yet the Speaker's chair of the US House of Representatives sits empty. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is locked in a fight for his political future, attempting to win the votes that he needs to become Speaker of the US House of Representatives. A group of 20 members of his own party have torpedoed McCarthy's speakership bid. Despite endless talks and signs of concessions, the impasse continues, bringing to a standstill all functions of the chamber. For how long will this deadlock continue? What will be the implications for the grand old party? How does it impact the functioning of the US government? Also, with pressure mounting, will Kevin McCarthy withdraw? If not, who is going to be the Speaker of the US House of Representatives? All this and much more in perspective today with 4 distinguished panelists who are joining us on the program. Pleased to welcome on this edition of Perspective Mr. Lalit Kumar Jha. He is Chief US Correspondent, PTI. Mr. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, he is Foreign Affairs Editor, Hindustan Times. Meera Shankar, former Indian Ambassador to the United States of America. And Professor K.P. Vijayalakshmi, she is Professor of US Studies, Center for Canadian, US and Latin American Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you to all my panelists and welcome to the program. Mr. Jha, let me begin the program today with you. First, let's put into context for our viewers what has led to a deadlock of this kind. What really are the 20 Republicans opposed to? Why have they rejected McCarthy's speakership bid in the first place?
Yeah, because first of all, when the elections were held on November 8th, Republicans got 22 seats and the Democrats 213 seats. The elections started this week. McCarthy has not been able to get the majority of the votes which will put the speakership post. This is primarily because 20 odd members from his party are opposing his elections. These are the fire apart extremist kind of group who have sharp differences with policies. This is one of the reasons for that. But overall, if you see things in the democratic, it is democracy at work in the US right now. In the last couple of years, American democracy has been tested multiple times, and it is one of the other tests that's going through. It's for the first time in 100 years that a speaker has gone into multiple rounds, and one doesn't know how many rounds it will go. It's going to be for. Coming back to the Republican Party, the overwhelming majority of the party congressmen are with McCarthy. 7 rounds of votes have shown that. But so the 20 small group which it hostage the entire process, right?
Of course, Mr. Chaudhary, the chamber is in a standstill because until the speaker is elected, no other elected member can take oath, and the further other functions can also not happen. But the larger implications on the functioning of the US government, because 3 days and we've seen no result, how many rounds it is going to take into is something that nobody can forecast. And as Mr. Jha suggests, even though the talks are underway, it seems to be an uncertain path for the moment. So largely, what are the kind of implications that it is having on the functioning of the United States?
I think the first element is that for McCarthy, if he is to succeed in breaking or dividing the 20 hardline Republicans, he's already begun to try and has begun making a number of major concessions to that group, to the far right, including offering them seats on important committees and offering to introduce some legislation on their behalf. That would be itself disruptive if he actually succeeds, if he gets them to come on board, but has to make all of these political concessions, because it will push an even more a potentially hardline libertarian or otherwise right-wing agenda onto the House of Congress, which will then cause further problems for the US political system. There isn't, to be fair, too much major legislation planned this year, as far as I know. But one crucial element is the debt limit, the US federal public debt. Every year, there is a legislative cap on America's ability to increase its debt. and the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives has to waive that cap. That has often been a stormy battle because Republicans have been traditionally reluctant, especially when a Democratic president is in office, to raise that cap, which curiously, if it is not raised, it in fact means America would, in theory, go bankrupt in the sense that the American government would no longer be able to issue salaries or spend money without that debt limit being raised. A couple of times, America has come very close to that. If there is no speaker or the House of Representatives is so paralyzed that it is unable to pass legislation or increase the debt limit, America could see a bizarre financial crisis of being the richest country in the world, unable to pay its own budget or pay for its own salaries and workers. Last time that came that close to America not doing so, you saw the international stock markets in particular become extremely volatile because U.S. Treasury bonds are the underpinning of the entire global financial system. So that's, I think, the biggest concern that the rest of the world will have on that front. But as I said, the domestic legislative requirements or concessions that McCarthy would have to make to become the speaker could change the, should we say, legislative agenda to a much more extreme, polarizing, and ideological stance.
Certainly. And before we proceed and talk about what it means, what this kind of division means for the Republican Party, and let me go across to Ambassador for that. But Professor Vijayalakshmi, before that, if I could also, ask you to make us and our viewers understand, why are these elections so important? What are the roles of the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives? Because as we are seeing, because the Speaker has not been elected, everything seems to have come to a standstill. And as Mr. Chaudhary explained, this could have implications on a lot of things, domestically as well as internationally.
Well, the problem is that, you should understand that the Speaker stands third in line for the president. After the vice president, it is the speaker who stands to become the president in case there is any crisis. So that's the first important point to remember about the role of the speaker. The second is the speaker has enormous powers and clout because the speaker can, for example, give committee, seatings. That is, he or she, it's been she for a long time, Nancy Pelosi. The speaker can allot committees plus raise campaign funds. These are very critical things. Apart from that, the speaker, not in the traditional sense of a parliamentary democracy where there's a whip, party whip, nevertheless shepherds legislation. And legislation is far more than just the powers of the House or the Senate, for example. You must be knowing that the Senate often has to nominate and then consider the nominations by the president and then approve of it. That is the power it has, the checks and balances system on which it functions. Whereas a speaker is unusual in that sense that they not only operate as part of the very major, basis for legislation. For example, if they are not sworn in as legislators, how can they make law? So, the Democrats are already saying that we are going to keep passing nominations, which have been waiting. We are going to now. So you're going to shortly perhaps expect your ambassador to India come in, because the notes we are getting from the Senate is that they're going to pass all the nominees. But it's not just that function alone for the House. And the speaker is critical because not only, but then rises the question, then how come that Republican Party, there's such a fight going on, which is what you've raised. And I think one of the problems is this group of people don't consider particularly any of those perks necessary for their political future. And we can go into details about that. But the major reason why they're objecting to him is because of their extreme conservative agenda, which they feel McCarthy has compromised earlier or has not been this thing. And the other important thing about why the speaker's role has become so prominent now is in this geopolitical volatility of what America does and what America thinks of doing. The previous speaker's visit to Taiwan really created a number of ripples, if not just ripples. I think there were quite serious things happening in terms of what are the implications of that kind of thing. China took it very, very seriously. So a speaker visiting somewhere also has these implications, but it all stems from this very important fact that he or she is third in line to the succession of the presidency. They have enormous power in terms of setting the rules of legislations, committees, providing committee chairs and membership, plus helping in campaign funds, setting the legislative agenda, and even the ethics of the House, the ethics and rules committees. So I think these are the simplest way of explaining how a speaker is crucial to the institutional functioning also of the House.
Right. And Ambassador, that's why, even in this important election for the post of the Speaker, the fact that divisions within the Republicans are out in the open, it's a public spectacle which seems to be quite embarrassing. And the Republicans clearly wouldn't have wanted to actually begin their majority in this way, which is one of its kind in recent history. What do you think this means for the grand old party? The divisions are very clear, and what lies in the future is something which is difficult to predict. Ambassador Shankar?
Well, I think, America has never been as polarized as it is today politically. And that polarization is not just between parties, between the Republican and Democratic Party. It is also within parties, as we are seeing within the Republican Party. There is a small, hard, far-right group of 20 which has been able to block the election of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker because they think that he's too centrist and they would want a more right-wing stance overall for the party within Congress. We have also seen within the Democratic Party, the left wing or what they call the progressives in the Democratic Party, sometimes being able to hold the party to a lot of pressure and to set the agenda. But this time round, the Democrats are holding together because each round of voting, their candidate, who's really standing in opposition to Mr. McCarthy, Hakeem Jeffries from New York, has got all the Democratic votes of 212. Partly the difficulties, I think, also stem from the fact that what happened, after the presidential election with allegations of the election being stolen, with the attack on the US Congress, all these are unprecedented events and have divided the Republican Party quite sharply over the view and the stance that they take on these. You've seen Liz Cheney, a traditional conservative, criticize what happened, and she lost the Republican nomination as a result. So you have this Make America Great Again group of the Republicans, basically Trump supporters, far-right supporters, who are holding the Republican election of the Speaker to ransom, if you will, because the total majority that the Republicans got in the House was very small. So as a result, they acquire disproportionate weight in terms of outcomes. And clearly, this is going to continue because Mr. McCarthy has said he's going to continue with his nomination, but how it pans out is going to be difficult to say. Either he is able to win some of the hardline Republicans and get a consensus, but in that case, his own ability to guide the House or steer it in the direction that he may have wanted,
right. I think
be compromised.
What looks like and what we are hearing, Mr. Jha, is that Mr. McCarthy is clearly not going to, withdraw. He's holding talks, and in his quest to become the Speaker, he's also offering concessions. What is it that you can tell us? What are the kind of concessions that he's actually offering? and what would they mean for the post of the Speaker, if at all, if he manages to win? Will this move weaken the Speaker's position? Mr. Jha?
I don't know what. I'm not.
Yes, carry on.
So I don't know what kind of concession has not happened.
We seem to have lost your audio again, Mr. Jha. Let me take the same question to Mr. Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary, are you aware of the concessions that Mr. McCarthy has offered to this group of Republicans who have rejected his speakership bid?
The 20 Republican hardliners are themselves a mixed group. Some of them who are from the Freedom Caucus, which is a small, somewhat libertarian group. He has basically offered them seats, if I'm correct, in the Rules Committee, giving them some capacity to control the legislative process. Some of the other groups, he has agreed to allow that some of their legislation, which would be, I think, considered fringe in the normal course of events, would be put before the House to be debated and voted on. It's unlikely that they would succeed, but their hope is obviously for these groups that they would achieve a certain degree of profile and publicity, which is what they're seeking. There are probably other concessions he may have made to individual members, which I at least don't know about. But those two we are in the public arena. Keep in mind that part of, I think, McCarthy's plan is to keep holding votes until some of the congressmen on either side just stop showing up to vote out of tiredness. Because what happens then, just as it is in the Indian Parliament, it is a majority of those present that matters. So if enough members of either the Democrats or moderate Republicans decide not to show up, or even the conservative ones, it's possible he can just get by essentially being able to get a majority of a reduced House by, let's say, 20 or 30 congressmen just getting tired of showing up and disappearing and not bothering to vote. Otherwise, probably of what I'm hearing is that Stephen Scalise of Louisiana would be the most likely contender for the position if McCarthy were to fail, insofar as that Scalise has a number of supporters on both sides of the aisle and the most likely to get together a coalition, cobble together a coalition,
Right.
if it's decided that McCarthy is simply unable to go forward.
Professor Vijay Lakshmi, as we speak and what we hear from the reports is that endless rounds of talks are underway. Mr. McCarthy is trying to persuade, this cohort of 20 Republicans who have opposed his election. But in the process, he is offering more and more concessions. Does that somewhere erode the Speaker's power? Even if McCarthy manages to win the election, what is he doing for himself? Is he weakening his position? What do you think?
Well, I think you've hit the spot. You've hit the nail on the head, because one of the demands is to, weaken the Speaker's position by forcing a vote against the Speaker, even one or three, the debating that. Now, if you're going to go against the Speaker every time you don't agree with what the Speaker is doing, and that then becomes a major source of challenge for any working Speaker. So that's what he has to consider. I mean, he can't concede just to become Speaker and find that there's no speakership skills involved at all, So he's going to have to consider that. The other thing is that he can also, of course, he can become, as Pramit really pointed out, there is no problem if they all, don't even vote. I mean, they're not absent, but just vote as present. Even then, the majority which says yes, that would be counted. The problem is, after doing all of this, if he has no legislative agenda to speak of, that is, if the Speaker cannot shape the legislative agenda, he cannot, he has to expect a revolt every now and then whenever this group of 20 do not agree with. For example, they are very angry on, on the border issues, for example, immigration bill, debt ceiling, gun safety. There are many other issues I can flag, but Texas representative is one of the most vocal. Florida is another one. And remember, from Florida, you're also getting DeSantis, who's otherwise won the election. So, there are some very interesting things going on over there, because whether this is, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that Trumpism, which looked like a major challenge for the American politics, seems to be in disarray, because even though Mr. Trump, by the way, saw the latest line, he got one vote. So you don't have to be a member of the Congress to stand for Speaker. So he got one vote amidst much laughter, etc. So the question is, many people expected that Trumpism, despite or not, in spite of Trump being there or not there, is going to be there, which is what MAGA is all about. But is that going to be something that's going to interfere in the institutional process? That I think is very, very clear, that the institution and the legislative process itself is now headed for a very major turbulence, because this is, as it is a lame duck Congress, they have only 2 years,
Right.
and the president's party is in no mood to do any kind of concessions. In fact, Hakeem Jeffries is getting all the votes. So he's saying, okay, you people cross over and make me the, speaker, and we'll do business. So there is a hope, however, that there will be some bipartisanship, which is what perhaps McCarthy would try. But I think at this stage, it's very unlikely unless these people. And the third important point is that these guys don't really care whether who becomes speaker. Because Kelly's, yes, he's in Jordan, who was expected to be the other big choice, said, no, I support Mr. McCarthy. So, there are these number of things going on. But the fact is, they are more interested in holding this person to hostage and shaping all of these institutional changes rather than really winning the speakership, because there's no clear alternative that's really emerging, despite
Ambassador,
all the talks, despite all of that.
Do you also
so
think,
that speaks,
taking on from what Professor Vijayalakshmi says, and sorry to cut you short, Professor Vijayalakshmi, time is running out. Let me take a quick comment from Ambassador as well. Ambassador, taking on from what Professor was just suggesting, do you also think, is it just a glimpse of the future, the time, a reflection of the difficulties of the times to come in terms of passing legislations also? This was just the Speaker's election. It was supposed to be an easy affair, and it has taken so long. The kind of, political spectacle it has turned into, nobody would have expected. But in the times to come, do you also see it as a glimpse of the difficulties that lie ahead?
Yes, because, it's an election which has given the House to the Republicans and the Senate to the Democrats. So it's a divided Congress. But they have actually worked together in the past. For instance, in passing the, gay marriage law, several Republicans crossed over and supported the law, which Biden was able to get through the Congress. So if there is a degree of bipartisanship which emerges during the election of the Speaker, right now the Democrats are not playing ball with the Republicans. They are happy to watch their predicament. But supposing a section of the Democrats decides to be absent, and in return for their support for McCarthy then shapes a more moderate agenda, then you may have a different situation. But if, on the other hand, he gets elected by giving concessions after concessions to his own 20 right-wingers, then the situation would be different, and there's likely to be a total legislative stalemate.
Right. What really happens is something that we'll all have to wait and watch. But for now, whether Mr. McCarthy will withdraw or whether he'll be able to persuade the opposing group of 20 Republicans in order to win their votes to become the Speaker is something that will be known in a few days. But for now, time is running out. I'll have to thank all my panelists for joining us on this edition of Perspective and sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And thank you very much, viewers, for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.